Morning, Ron. Welcome to this morning's edition of the NPC Markets Morning Call, 23rd of March, 2026. So fair bit has happened over the course of the last 72 hours. Trump's announced a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran, which came out Saturday night, our time here in Sydney. It will expire if we go off when the Truth Social announcement was made, which is not your traditional announcement platform for most presidents. But if you go off that, it's around about around about this time tomorrow, basically, 8:44 a.m. Basically. So the ultimatum is reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or we're going to, I think the quote was, we will hit and obliterate your power plants. So Iran has then come back and said basically that that they would retaliate pretty heavily if that was going to be the case. So we're obviously seeing seeing the situation probably escalate as much as it has in this entire time so far. While there's been a few ships have been let through under diplomatic negotiations that have been non-American. And they're not allowed to be paid in US dollars, which I think is a bit of a threat to the petro currency or the petrodollar. We're seeing oil this morning up around the $100 mark. It's been pretty volatile on the open. No sort of wild swings to the upside. Gold as well had its worst week in 40 years. Essentially, that was all to do with bond yields. So we had the options expiry on Friday as well in the US, but it was pretty wild considering the timeline of events, because Trump flip-flopped over the course of the session before obviously making that announcement on a Saturday when the markets were closed. So we've had a lot of these chip makers get hit, and there's all of these fringe issues with with Qatar and that gas hub, etc. There's now a lack of helium, which is very key for chip making. There's a lack of natural gas as well. Natural gas prices are just absolutely spiraling through the roof, particularly in certain areas of the world, in Europe particularly. But look, just a general index selling. The only green you can really see here is a couple of the financials, because we're expecting now obviously interest rates to be a little bit higher, or a fair bit higher in the long term. We're looking at sort of staples like communications or oil, etc. There with the only sort of green on Friday night. Equities now. All of the indicators really. Even the Nikkei's the last one standing with a buy in the weekly technical, but everything else is now very strongly in sell territory for the technicals, which means that buy the dip is going to be challenged on a continual basis now, because you won't have those algorithmic trading systems or the buy the dip or the momentum systems supporting the market at all. Now we've got every time frame in strong sell or sell for nearly every market basically. And that's the fourth week in a row we've had the indices in negative territory. So, as you can see here, gold down nearly 9% for the week, silver down nearly 15%, copper down as well. Particularly, those did pretty well. Copper and platinum to not be built. They haven't rallied as much as what gold and silver has. But I think we'll start to see a bit of a turnaround in those realistically, because this is heightened spending from the US is only going to make their debt worse while we're distracted. But I think what we'll start to see is this energy tax, on top of tariffs, etc. The US may be energy independent, but doesn't mean that they're not going to, it's not going to push global oil prices. The global oil price is not going to have an effect on them at all. So there will be pain at the pump, and I think that people are going to start to look through the immediate inflation effect and start to look at how much of this is going to affect economic growth, which could be quite significant. And we're already at a fairly, at a bit of a precipice in terms of layoffs, etc., the unemployment market would be significant. Well, the unemployment rate would be significantly higher if the immigration rate remained constant from the last administration. So, really, it's only the subdued participation rate that's keeping that down there at the moment. As you can see, crude did drift off a little, but edging on $100 now. Brent crude at 112, 113, and everyone's just on tender hooks basically until we see what Trump does and whether he tacos. It would be a fairly significant and humiliating taco at this stage. I don't see the Iranians backing down. That's been our general thesis the entire time. Generally, when you've got a leader in place which whose family have been killed by by these strikes from the Israelis and the US, and the Israelis have said a number of things, but I mean, this is what's pushing gold down at the moment. You can see these are bond yields, and the top ones there are the Australian bond yields, the bottom ones are the US bond yields, but this is only over a 3-month period, but you can see them spiking to fairly significant highs for long-term yields. That's what's really depressing those store of value or those gold and silver prices. But going to Congress and asking for another $200 billion for the Pentagon, the dampening consumer, because Trump's thesis has always been, or his plan has always been, we're going to grow out of this. We need lower interest rates, et cetera. And all he's ended up creating is an inflationary situation, and which effectively is dampening growth. So he's really sort of screwed the pooch on this pretty badly. Whether or not there is some broader plan here, but I really don't think so. So this was the volatility on Friday night, and the Kobayashi letter. It's a great thing on Twitter. They put out some really good research, so shout out to them. But we saw the market getting absolute. This is the S&P ETF, but getting absolutely hammered. And then you can see he's considering boots on the ground. It really got hammered. And then look, this is 2:30 p.m. We're talking like an hour and 15 minutes later. The guy turns around and says, "I don't want a ceasefire with Iran," and then 2 hours later, or less than 2 hours later, turns around and says he's considering winding down Iran, and then we basically finish up 1.8% from the low. So it could have been a hell of a lot worse, basically, on Friday, and it was significantly lower. And this has been the general timeline, and we've vetted this through multiple platforms here, but. Yeah, I don't want to do a ceasefire was the talk on Friday, and then we could end the war immediately. And then Iran's got no navy, no military assets left, except for all of those drones and naval mines that can keep that 33 kilometres of the Strait of Hormuz closed, which is really all that the Iranians have been focusing on. And there was a long range missile that was aimed, which missed, but a UK and a US base in the Indian Ocean as well over the course of the weekend. It was reported that basically the US and the allies were unaware that they had that sort of range. The Iranians could have just reduced the weight and taken the warhead out or whatever. There's been a bunch, but they were not thought to have that range capacity for their ballistic missiles. So I don't know whether Trump's necessarily can be massively trusted on this. The intelligence may not be up to date. Obviously, then in the evening Iran is defeated. They want a deal. They flatly denied that, and then which has embarrassed him a little bit. And then Saturday, 21st of March. This is like I say, it's 8:44 a.m. Our time. On Sunday morning, if Iran doesn't fully open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, the United States will hit and obliterate their power plants, starting with the biggest ones first. Then he's gone on to say a little bit later, the US does not need NATO's help, but would welcome it. And then the 48-hour deadline obviously expires tomorrow morning at 8:44 a.m. So we're basically, I mean, who knows what he's going to say over the next 48 hours. we don't really know what we don't really know what's going to happen overall in terms of this ultimatum. I can't see the Iranians coming to the table. I really can't. And we're just going to have to see how this plays out, particularly in Asia overall. I think everything else is kind of irrelevant until then, and we're sort of sitting here waiting to see what happens until that point, realistically. And it'll be a pretty horrible day in the SPY, I would imagine. You're going to see. I think the SPY futures were pointing down at least 1.5%. We've got crude actually slightly down now, 97 as of 9:30 this morning. It did trade 100 crude futures early on in the session, and it's drifted. It opened at 95, went straight to just above 100, and is sitting around this 97 mark at the moment. We're seeing futures are not really open in the States yet, and I would imagine we had weekend Dow showing down like 1%. So you obviously need to be a little bit careful out there, we'll try and put some updates on Mosaic over the course of the day, and keep a very close watch on this Iran situation. But we will speak again tomorrow. Fucking general advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.